All right, let's talk about one of the most fundamental ideas in all of cybersecurity, network security monitoring. It's really the art of making the invisible visible, of actually knowing what's going on inside your network. And by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly how the pros see everything.
It all really kicks off with this one simple question. How can you possibly guard a network if you can't see what's coming in or what's going out? The honest answer? You can't. It's impossible. So today, we're going to talk about building our network's watchtower, giving ourselves that high ground view to spot trouble long before it becomes a real problem.
So before we can even think about building that watchtower, we need to do something super important first. We have to understand the lay of the land. That's the foundation for everything that comes next. Look, you wouldn't build a real watchtower without first looking at a map, right? Of course not. The exact same logic applies here. You absolutely need a detailed network diagram. This map is going to be your guide, showing you the most critical intersections and choke points where you should place your monitoring gear. Okay, so once you know where you need to look, you have to decide what tool you're going to use to do the looking. This brings us to the brains of the whole operation, the sensor. And as you'll see, not all sensors are created equal. So you can think of sensors as having 3 levels of smarts. At the most basic level, you've got simple recording. It's just a data vacuum, sucking up all the raw traffic without thinking about it. Step 2 adds a layer of detection. It can flag things that look kind of suspicious, but it needs to send the data somewhere else for the deep analysis. And then you have level 3, the whole shebang, a sensor that records, detects, and does all the heavy-duty analysis right there on its own.
All right, we know where to put our sensor and we've picked out its brain. But how do we actually get the network data to the sensor? To actually get a copy of that traffic, we've got 2 main tools in our toolbox.
First up, we have what's called a span port. The fancy name is Switched Port Analyzer. Just imagine your network switch is like a busy office building with lots of hallways. A span port is kind of like installing a security camera that makes a copy of the video feed from a few hallways and sends it all to your security office. The best part? It's a feature that's often already built right into the switches you already own.
And that convenience is really the biggest selling point for a span port. It's probably already there in your hardware, waiting to be turned on. You can just configure it remotely, a few clicks, a few commands, and boom, you're monitoring. It's a super easy, super low-cost way to get started.
But, and this is a huge but, there is a major catch. When the network gets really busy, the switch has a main job to do, and that's moving traffic. Making copies for your span port? Well, that becomes a low priority. And that means the switch might start dropping packets from your monitoring feed. Losing even a few of those packets could mean you miss the one clue that shows you're under attack. It also can't see what we call physical layer errors. Think stuff like a bad cable or electrical interference. A software feature like a span port is just blind to that kind of problem.
So for those times when you absolutely positively have to see everything, we turn to our second tool, the network tap. Now, if a span port is like a security camera that can get choppy when things get busy, a tap is like a perfect one-way mirror that's built right into the wall. It's a dedicated piece of hardware whose only job is to make a flawless copy of every single packet, and it does it without getting in the way of the live network traffic at all.
The number one reason to use a tap is its rock-solid reliability. It's built for one thing and one thing only, making a perfect 100% lossless copy of your traffic. It will never, ever drop a packet, no matter how busy the network gets. And because it's a physical device sitting on the wire, it sees everything, including those physical layer errors that span ports are totally blind to.
So what's the downside to this perfect visibility? Well, it comes down to cost and a little bit of legwork. Unlike a span port you can just turn on, a tap is a physical box you have to buy and install. That means you have to physically go to the server rack, unplug a live cable, plug it into the tap, and then plug the tap back in. That's going to cause a quick network blip, and of course, it costs money.
Okay, so we've got 2 solid options here, the easy but flawed span port and the super reliable network tap. How in the world do you choose? Let's put them head to head.
Honestly, the choice between a span port and a network tap really just boils down to one thing: your tolerance for risk. If reliability is everything, if you absolutely cannot risk missing a single packet of a potential attack, then a tap is your only real option, period. But if you're on a tight budget or just need a quick and dirty, good enough setup to get started, a span port is a totally fine place to begin. It's that classic trade-off, cost versus having a perfect, crystal clear view of your network. Now, if you do decide to go with the tap, there's just one more little choice you have to make. You can get an aggregation tap,
which takes all the traffic, the data being sent and the data being received, and bundles it all together onto one monitoring port for your tool. Or you can get a non-aggregation tap, which keeps them separate. It sends the send traffic to one port and the receive traffic to another. This is really useful if your security tool needs to see the two sides of the conversation separately.
And here's a little fun fact for anyone who likes to tinker. You can actually build your own network tap. Yeah! There's a really popular do-it-yourself design out there called the Throwing Star LAN tap. Building something like this is a fantastic way to really truly understand what's happening at the physical level.
All right, we have our map, we have our sensor, we have our tool to get the data. We're almost there. Now for the last big strategic question, where is the absolute best place to build our watchtower? The answer is actually really simple and really smart. You want to place your sensors at the network's transition points, the main gateways where all of your traffic has to enter and leave. Think of it like this. Why guard 100 different windows when you could just put your best guard at the only bridge leading into your kingdom? By monitoring these choke points, you get the most possible visibility for the least amount of effort.
Wow, we have covered a ton of ground. So let's slow down for a second and just lock in the most important things you need to take away from all this.
Okay, if you remember nothing else, remember these 4 things. 1. Span ports are awesome because they're easy, but they are totally unreliable when the network gets slammed. 2. Network taps are the fail-safe gold standard option if you need a perfect copy of your data. 3. The smartest place to put your monitoring gear is right at the edge of your network. And 4. The whole decision really comes down to that classic balancing act between cost, convenience, and how much risk you're willing to live with. And that brings us to one last thing to think about. What about your own network at home? For the traffic coming in and out of your house. Given everything we just talked about, the pros, the cons, the trade-offs, do you think the convenience of a span port would be good enough, or is that guaranteed visibility from a tap worth the extra effort? It's a great question that really brings these big ideas right back home. Thanks for diving in with me today.